Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. This is going to be quite an exciting one. I'm hoping that Andrew and Ulises are going to engage us in something a little bit more active than some of the normal presentations. But just before we get to that, I just wanted to quickly say that this is the Futures of Design Education discussion series, and that's organised by EdSig. That's the kind of education special interest group for the Design Research Society. We organise monthly events that anyone interested in design education is more than welcome to come along to. The next one is on the 12th of December, and it's our very own Michael Hall, who's going to be looking at the ways in which he integrates systems thinking into some of his design curricula. And anybody who's been to one of these events before knows that Michael asks some quite interesting questions, kind of 90-degree questions. So that could be quite a good one. Right now, we're also looking at what we're going to be doing into the new year for future Futures of Design Education discussions. So as always, if anybody has any ideas, people that they'd like to hear from, please just let us know. Get in touch with me directly or whatever. But what I want to do today is just hand straight over to Andrew and Ulises today. And I'll just let you introduce yourselves, if that's okay, folks, and let you introduce what you're going to be doing today as well. Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Derek. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Really exciting to see such a great amount of interest in this topic. We are going to try something a little bit different, and hopefully this doesn't give people too many flashbacks to COVID times. But we do want to try and have an interactive session, and so I just pasted a link to a Miro board in the chat, and it's not mandatory. And we were trying to figure out good ways to engage the audience, and we thought about Mentimeter, but it seems like that can clean things up and make it a little bit too tidy. And we're at this point where we're hoping for kind of a messy conversation, and we think Miro invites a little bit more messiness, and we hope that you'll feel free to add things and change things throughout the conversation. Is everybody able to see the Miro board? I'm also going to share my screen. As I said, it's not mandatory. And there's the screen share. Okay, so we'll introduce ourselves in a sec. But first, I think we wanted to start just by saying welcome and thank you to the DRS Education Special Interest Group. And Derek and everybody on the EdSig has been really supportive of this from the very beginning. So big thanks for giving us this platform to engage the global community of design educators. Also, a shout out to our colleague Marcia Arico, who helped us frame some of this initial conversation, wasn't able to join us for this session. And then really colleagues around the globe. This actually emerged from an invitation to participate in developing a track proposal for DRS 2026. And we got a lot of interest around it. So really, without that interest, I don't think we would have gotten this far in even having a conversation with Derek about this session. And the session is really about this kind of topic of design education at a certain point in human history, where we have design education that has historically been situated as a practice that addresses demands of creativity, ethics, and markets, and that's kind of this sweet spot for design. But we're also in this world of facing threats to academic freedom, neoliberalization, austerity, and a demand to demonstrate a return on investment for a lot of students. And we've been inspired by a lot of work from other people. We have some references in the slides at the end of the deck if you'd like to see. So now, with that kind of quick background in place, we wanted to introduce ourselves and talk about the local context in which we're reaching you. So I'm Andrew Whitcomb. I'm an assistant professor at Arizona State University in the United States. I'm in the sunny desert at the moment. And I'll pass it over to Ulises.
Yes, thank you. I mean, likewise, I'm super happy to be here. Thank you, Derek, and this community for hosting us and hosting this conversation. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, Andrew and I started talking about this, and you can see in the picture how we come. I mean, we're based in very different contexts, but we saw kind of like some similarities and thought that it would be interesting to maybe explore that with kind of like other people as well. So yeah, my name is Ulises Navarro Aguiar, and I'm based in Sweden, in the west coast of Sweden, which some say is the best coast, and I tend to agree. And I'm a senior lecturer in design here in the Academy of Art and Design. HDK Valand is the name of the academy.
Great, and really what we were excited about this this conversation is that it is about taking some of these global trends and potentially forces that are shaping design education across the world, but then seeing how they're playing out for everybody in their local context. And so really this is about you all as well, and wherever you are in the world, what kind of institution you're in, whether you're an active educator currently, or whether you're an alumni of a program and you're a working professional, or you're somewhere in between. We think that your perspective on these topics is really valuable. So we're hoping to explore that. And we know that these conversations often are about providing insights, but really we're at the beginning of kind of shaping an inquiry. And so I think we're excited to use this as a way to not come up with answers, but ask more questions that then can lead to more kind of research and inquiry across the globe. So with that context in place, here's our agenda. We know that this is not enough time to tackle such big topics, especially with a large group across the world. So really, this is the start. And we'll talk about our plans for the future of this as we wrap up. But we kind of wanted to just initiate a few conversations around some topics and see how they resonate and see what comes out of it. So with that background in place, let's hop in. We have our first prompt. Ulises, you wanna start with this?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, the first prompt is really about basically opening a conversation around for those of you who are educators, which I think is maybe the majority here. So to basically share experiences of kind of your institutional contexts, and particularly what we're interested in exploring here is so how have you kind of experienced kind of like shifts in how kind of higher education is framed and the role of higher education. And so what we kind of like, how we started kind of like thinking about this, we kind of like realized that, you know, we feel like, you know, there's this orientation towards kind of like producing skills and kind of generating kind of graduates that, you know, are credentialed professionals, and so it's very focused on kind of like the skill production, so to speak. And usually kind of like we notice that there's more of a pressure to actually produce, to actually become part of a economic system, to basically keep the system turning around economic performance, and how can our graduates basically insert themselves into the job market in a way that you know, basically they contribute to kind of economic growth and so on. And so kind of like these pressures, you know, might be coming from different places in different contexts, but you know, obviously it is linked to kind of like a sort of a general move towards neoliberalization. So which is kind of like obviously not new. This has been unfolding for kind of many years, and maybe some contexts are a bit more kind of neoliberal than others, but I mean, there are kind of degrees of neoliberalization, you could say. For example, in the cases of kind of the US and Sweden, which Andrew and I represent here, I mean, maybe we see kind of different degrees of this. But there's clearly a turn towards kind of marketization, you know, entrepreneurialism, and so part of the traditional discourses of neoliberalization that we see also kind of like sipping into design education. But not only that, we also kind of like notice, particularly kind of like the current political cultural climate. There's also kind of like what some people have called a post-neoliberal moment, right? Like where we're seeing kind of like, it's not really kind of like, I mean, like an evolution of neoliberalism in its more kind of a authoritarian form. And that is creating new challenges as well for a lot of colleagues in different places. So we're very interested in kind of this tension, right, between, on the one hand, the designer citizen, and particularly as educators, our role in contributing to the formation of designer citizens who can you know, use their kind of professional expertise in interesting ways, versus the marketable designer, which is the pressure of, like, you know, students, you know, inserting themselves into the job market and so on. Yeah, I don't know if you, Andrew, want to add something there.
No, so I think that with that kind of background in place, we wanted to pose these questions to the group, and you can kind of, we'll just kind of open the floor. These are not necessarily questions that you have to answer directly. They're more kind of thought starters, and you can answer them in different ways. If you want to just answer by talking, you're free to just speak up on Teams, or there's a little stack of Post-its down here on the Miro board, and you can grab them and place them just about anywhere and write your comments. And I'll probably take some notes on them as well. So we'll see how messy it gets. So our two questions to start the conversation are you facing shifting institutional pressures or expectations of your work? How are you managing them? And is the current cultural and political climate raising uncertainties or troubles about design education futures in your institution?
Again, feel free to share using the sticky notes, or if you also want to open your mic, please do feel free to go ahead.
Hi, I'm Karina. I just wanted to say that I think marketization is been very evident. I think even before post neoliberal higher ed, but like getting designers prepared for the job market and getting them like kind of the skills machine into the workforce. So it is kind of hard, I think, for design educators to argue against the marketization of design students because like in some ways we're trying to scaffold that academic preparation into design education that will prepare you for like a variety of careers and not necessarily just applying the skills that you will be learning in school. So I think there could be thoughts on like how do we perceive perhaps communicating the idea that we don't necessarily need to market our students as directly to these jobs as we think we need to be doing. Like they're going to be going to all sorts of different kinds of careers. We do not need to necessarily prepare them in every single business context possible. It's not feasible, I think.
I think there's a raised hand. Is that?
Yeah, sorry, that was me. I always struggle with Teams because I don't use it on frequently. I wanted to speak to the second question, which is the current cultural and political climate raising uncertainties. I'm located in Canada, and because of some policy changes from the government, a lot of educational institutions are in crisis because of the policies around international students and other funding cuts. So certain programs have been prioritized over the other, particularly a lot of the cuts we've seen have been to humanities programs. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So it does push us to consider marketization, to essentially provide like a value proposition to our programs, which when I was in school, I'm a PhD student now. It wasn't a conversation that I remember that was floating around a lot. So yeah, I think that's definitely been top of mind for many educators here.
Yeah, I think Glenn is raising his hand, right?
Sorry, I just unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, so just coming back to hi from the southwest of Ireland. But yeah, coming back to kind of skills, I work in kind of like the theory, the academic side of the house, taught to fine art and design disciplines. And coming back to kind of marketing and marketing yourself, they often kind of what I feel is students only kind of value the verbal tools after they leave, if that's helpful, when they have to apply for kind of, applications for bursaries and whatnot. But in terms of skill orientation, they often we can be quite visual heavy in terms of designers that we think in pictures at the time. And then we know in our head what we want to say about it, but putting that down on paper, which is often a kind of an academic requirement, in terms of obtaining an award, that is just something that kind of springs to mind, for me, and it's often kind of like a not linear, but a spectrum. Like some people might be like, 10% visual, 90% verbal, or vice versa, and whatever. But I do think sometimes that students, in terms of the experience of me as an educator, would struggle to get that kind of down on paper, to articulate it well. And even though it's quite kind of academic heavy sometimes when you're teaching it to them, it's about giving them the confidence when they leave to add cogency to the sale when they're selling their work to another, if that makes sense. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution. It does make sense, at least to me. I think I'd seen other raise hands, but not anymore, maybe. Sorry, I'm just checking. Yeah, I see one raise hand. Yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, this is Anwar.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Anwar from Pakistan. We have, as most part of the world, we have two type of institutions in design, which is one is research universities generally, and the second is art and design institutions. So the situation in research or general universities is a bit different than the standard art and design institutions. So the pressure in general universities that has design part of their program has a lot of pressure, and we have this pressure to make students ready for the markets, and keeping the cultural aspect of the things here. We have a lot of pressure from parents as well. They want their kids to make money, to earn, and to do freelance, and that's sort of. And in my institution, we have a lot of pressure because the other departments like computer sciences, AI, and other, they have a good, they generate a good revenue. So the thing about citizen designers that's really get affected in this way. So we try to integrate social and the sustainable and other aspects of the education and institution, but the marketability of design program is a challenge in our scenario. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I guess one. Sorry, was someone speaking? No, I think it's just background noise. One thing that also kind of like came up as we were kind of planning this is to kind of actually realized how in a lot of places higher education is under attack. Maybe kind of and not so often design disciplines, but also design disciplines. But you see in certain places, particularly in the kind of Anglo world. So humanities departments being kind of like shut down. I know in the UK, for instance, kind of like also kind of in Leicester University, there was this department on critical management studies and political economy that was shut down. So I mean, sometimes kind of like the criteria to kind of make these sort of decision sometimes is based on this idea of how marketable a particular program is or not. So, and this raises questions about the nature of higher education. Who should be, I mean, is the market the one that should dictate what is or what is not proper education and programs and so on? And design as an applied discipline obviously has different challenges, but obviously there's more and more humanities and conversations between design and other social science disciplines. And so I guess it's interesting to raise that question of to see what is happening in other places like that. And Australia, for example, as well, I think there's also a lot of pressures and programs being closed down in many universities as well.
Yeah, and I think that some of the comments and reflections from folks are making me think too, like Glenn, your comment about the students and appreciating the impact of kind of their verbal skills, or maybe not appreciating that as much as they could in their process. It makes me think that, how difficult it can be to articulate value to people that we grow up in certain systems influenced by market thinking and saying, I want to see the value right away in something to be able to invest in it. And if I'm not seeing that immediate value, then it's, why do it? And I think that there's a little bit of pressure in the way that the market has infiltrated the way that we even think about learning and engaging with education.
Yeah, and even just to chime in there, like, just about them, like, just kind of encouraging them to, make design because it's good design, not for profit, but because it's good and it's impactful and it's different and it means something, and not just because, oh, I can make money out of this, yeah, stop using Helvetica, you know.
And I'm thinking maybe we should move on to the next prompt, Andrew, maybe?
Oh, Violetta, do you have a burning comment or question you want to add?
It was just a quick note, a positive note. In my university, since 2021, they are offering a design thinking module for all the engineering students. So, okay, it's about design thinking, but anyway, it's like my university is recognizing that the way designers approach problems are useful for other fields. So every engineering students have the opportunity to, it's a short model, it's only 4 or 5 weeks, but it's interesting. And so as design educators, we also have this challenge of thinking about design education for non-designers. It was just to add this positive note.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I think it's a good reminder to think of, see the positives as well. And I think we're hopefully going to get there at the end as well. We have a dedicated prompt to that. So moving on, and I think this started to come up in our first responses to the first prompt, is about perceptions of students. And I think this goes 2 ways. So hopefully there are some potential students right now or recent students, and we're curious about their perceptions or your perceptions, but we're also curious about perceptions that we have as educators or employers of students. And the issues that we started to frame this prompt around were that students in upcoming generations are facing precarity in the labor market. And existential threats, and that's influencing their relationship with education, with a desire for certain type of lifestyle or aspirations that they have for their careers. And at the same time, we see educators changing, and the system of education being influenced by market forces, neoliberalization, coloniality, etc., creating misguided perceptions of students, where we might be applying kind of this lens on students as people who just want to kind of tick the boxes and get their diploma, or they can't focus. They're not as driven as they used to be. They want things easy. This is just a transactional relationship with my education and to get me to the next step in life. And so our questions here are, how are you, as a current or former student, navigating tensions between market fit and positive impact after graduation? And how are you, as an educator or employer, encountering expectations and aspirations of new designers? Hi, Samantha. Please go ahead.
Hi. So I have, well, I mean, the answer to the first question for me is, so we talk already because I missed the first couple minutes. Or should we like post-it note first, or are we already discussing before I like break the instructions?
No, go ahead.
Let's go for
Okay. Okay. So yeah, well, I mean, I stay in academia. That's how I navigate the tensions. If I must admit it, I mean, that of course is a strategy to stay not necessarily free from the profit modeling and whatnot, because of course there's plenty of that inside academia, but it, at least it allows for some hope that you're training students towards futures that you believe in. If that makes sense. Maybe it's always a more utopic than it ever will be, but anyway. So that is the first question, and then the second question I think is kind of interesting because I recently shifted from the art school to an engineering design school in the last 7 months. And one thing that is, so I complained about my art school design students a lot, but now I realize how amazing they were. So, because I'm like confronted with the deep tech feelings of the new place, and I'm just new also, so there's that. But the one thing that they tell me a lot, which I find to be incredibly disheartening, and so I don't know what to do with this. I think the students at the tech school that I'm at now are typically a little younger than the ones that were in the art school. So there is, I think, a generational shift that's happening as well. But many of them are asking for video so that they can watch it in 2 times speed, because coming to class and doing it regular speed is a waste of their time. And they have said that out loud to me, which I've been like, whoa, you don't want to talk at university? Like, why are we... what do we do then if you don't want to come for the social part of a university or a social part of an education? And so I don't know. I mean, what are the reasons for this? Is it the younger generations are just so digitally native that I can't, someone who's in her 40s, even comprehend? Is it that they are scared? Is it that they want things easier and things? I don't know. But that's something that I found. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but my 2-year-old is now trying to get in the door. But yeah, she heard me talking. But anyway, so that I find this little tidbit that just happened even last week to be really revealing. Now I'm now in interaction design. They're definitely more digitally native than my previous place with Ulises. So there is that as well. But yeah, can't be fast enough for them, apparently.
Yeah, but that's a super interesting thing, that how it models, sorry, a certain vision of education as content that you consume, right? So consumable content. Yes, there's a hand raised. Leslie Ann, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This might be more tied to the last question, but I think it's still relevant. You know, I'm in the space of designers who talks about social justice and social change, and that's the way I've organized my classes when I'm teaching. But there's a tension that I have to keep in mind. I didn't pay for my education, or at least I didn't pay the kind of money that these students pay. And so I always have to be balancing that tension that maybe actually, well, I don't want to say that they don't have the luxury to think like that, because we do have to get people to think about, yes, the world and change and future. But like I said, I didn't go into this kind of debt to get my education, so I could have a really political design education, or a context where I could I actually had a professor in one of the courses who said there are no jobs for you, and we were okay. We got we got to continue. Not that we were okay. We continued moving. I mean, we just learned how to hustle. But I don't know if now I'm an administrator. I certainly can't speak like that anymore. I really have been we're developing new programs. I'm in the same context that Rupsha referred to. I'm in Canada, and we have to think so intentionally about what futures. And I know that it's almost like it's a lie for us to be saying, okay, they're going to be X designers, when actually, yes, if I still believe that we can create education that can create many, many, many futures for them. But I'm just sharing the tensions of like being an administrator, knowing that they are going into phenomenal amounts of debt, and having to think about, yes, very intentionally, what prescribed futures they're going into, when again, we know that it's more open than that. There are many possibilities or none. And that's a scary thing, right?
Yeah, I think here, I mean, I can, oh yeah, no, go ahead. Rupsha, go ahead.
I think someone made this point in the sticky notes, so I'll make 2 points, but I'll keep this one a little bit brief since it was already mentioned. I think students are under a lot of stress, financial stress. They're facing mental health, um, challenges in their environment because of this financial stress, because of the stress that they faced during COVID, having to do school online. Um, we can talk about sort of the digital aspect of being on a screen or being on Zoom for long periods of time, being showcased for long periods of time that they have trouble with. Often they're working 2 to 3 jobs while in school, so they're just so stretched that they don't know what to do. And the promise of an education sometimes is that you're going to navigate away from having to work 2 or 3 jobs to keep a roof over your head. But then once you graduate and you're not able to get a job in the industry, you're in the same situation that you were in school, which is very disheartening. And then the next point I kind of want to make is like, I also think that there's this intellectualization that's happening where the value of seeking out a graduate education is also under attack. I know when I chose to go to graduate school, I was faced with a lot of like, why would you do this? It's not gonna like raise your income in any kind of way. Like, why would you want to pursue this path? if there's not a job waiting for you at the end of it. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I thought of when I saw the prompt.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I just wanted to do a quick statement that at Arizona State, we had a graduate degree in visual communication design that they closed because people stopped applying. And we haven't been getting enough people to apply for a master's in graphic design. And it's been hard to get the institution to support us bringing it back because they say you don't need that to get a job, basically, and that there's not a lot of value for students in going to get a graduate degree in graphic design. So definitely resonates what you were saying.
And also adding to that, I mean, also these part around the perception of students was also kind of like inspired by kind of we came across the work of Alfonso Matos, who we reference at the end of the presentation, which originates in this kind of master's thesis around who can afford to be critical. And so this idea of like, it's all fine and good to kind of like have a critical education and so on, but is it gonna help me pay my bills? Is it gonna allow me to have food in my fridge? And so this idea of also how sometimes kind of that ignores sort of a class issues in terms of like getting education and what it means. And yeah, so it raises interesting questions about what sort of criticality do we want students to enact. But yeah, these question around, yes, students are overworked, they have so many things going on and so many worries. Some are taking on debt, as mentioned in some contexts, just to be able to go to school. So it's a very interesting moment where there's this tension, right? There's an interesting tension between these things.
Good for it, Glenn. Maybe last one before we move on to the final prompt.
Yeah. So very quickly, just to come in on that, being in a school where we kind of have an education department where you can do like teaching for 4 years that would gear you towards kind of a secondary school curriculum or a high school curriculum in art and design. And then we have let's say our design department and then our fine art department. And it used to be the case that parents on open day would encourage students to design so they can get a job. And now they're all encouraging them to do the education one so they can get a job. So yeah, so it's kind of it's just an interesting point, so you could do like fashion or graphics or animation or ceramics, but in the end of the day, it doesn't guarantee you to get a employment. So it's about what you do with it yourself. So
great, thank you for that. It was certainly present in my decision when I was going to choose design school as, oh, that's a creative career where I can actually get a job. Okay, Ulises, do you want to take us to the last prompt?
Absolutely, yeah. So so these last prompts, is kind of like now focusing on, okay, so what are the possibilities given these various situations and the context of current institutional context. So we've been quite inspired by the work of Guy Juliet, who has been working a lot on these kind of sort of issues around kind of like design economies, of course, and kind of these understanding how design is being shaped by the economy and how design also could shape the economy as well in a different way than the traditional role that design has taken on. So almost also, I mean, he's kind of interesting in that he encourages to see kind of like as a design task to find also other ways of making a livelihood, and to kind of like basically live in the contradictions of capitalism in a certain way, right? So how can we foster that? How can we help our students live in these contradictions and actually kind of navigate the paradox? We also kind of like want to raise kind of, how difficult this is, right? To establish other models for organizing this, for organizing these design, work, education nexus. And so we would be kind of super interesting to hear how you think about this and how do you see it. How do you kind of like help educate designers with a critical consciousness, while at the same time equipping them to kind of deal with a fierce world out there. And also this idea of not just focusing on kind of like the designer. So this idea of that we essentially become these sort of like, I mean, design education is a lot about identity formation and identity work, and it's very kind of focused on the individual designer. So is there ways in which we can also kind of like try to generate other forms of collective action? What can we do collectively, which is also the spirit of the work by Matos and others that we reference here. So we're happy to hear your thoughts. We have these 2 prompt questions, Andrew, if you want to move yeah, exactly. So how are you designing spaces, structures to practice design differently after university, and alternative to a market-driven orientation? And how are you playing with tensions, leaving contradictions as design educators? And another way of phrasing, particularly this first point about the realities of the market and doing things differently, is almost like, how do we instill a vision of a form of realism, while also kind of like a form of idealism? And so how do we make them work together, these realist perspective and an idealist perspective?
How the hell do you do that?
I can also briefly share an experience here in Gothenburg. Earlier this spring, in April, some colleagues organized a forum, which was titled "Where Does the Critical Go?" And it was essentially kind of like a very kind of open forum, where they invited a bunch of graduates and people in kind of the community, and sort of designers working kind of on their own, working in studios, working for companies or public sector organizations, and the idea was to kind of like basically ask that question: where does the critical go? So after education, where does it go? How is it supported, and so on? And it was a very good experience to see how different people try to kind of and what we realize is the importance of collective action. So a lot of the opportunities that emerge is when people were coming together and make certain things happen. For example, people organize alternative forms of organizing their work, in collectives and such, cooperatives, etc. So yeah, it was an interesting experience that also prompted some of these questions.
Go for it, Derek. Thanks.
But was that for me?
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know where this is going to go. It's just to reflect on a couple of very recent sort of student meetings that I've had at our institution. That's the Open University in the UK. Again, we're a distance education institution. Traditionally, our students have been older students. They've either been people who've been in employment and have decided to change careers, or are just educating for the sake of educating. That has shifted significantly away from education for the sake of it to a much more marketized or a commodity. But still, there is a bit of that ethos that is retained. That yes, I might be buying a bit of education, but it still has to have some meaningful purpose for me as well. So I am finding that we are having slightly different conversations, perhaps to colleagues who are maybe speaking to a much younger population, who maybe don't even have a conception of what workplace or identity in workplace or identity in insert economic context, political context here. So some of the things that I've noticed that are slightly different are that it's not either or. That's a big thing that we're getting from our students. It's not that I'm not interested in skills. I'm only interested in values and ideas and goals and stuff like that. It's actually they're wanting both of these things, and they're wanting us to help them, I guess, deliver the language that they can give to others to show that these two things go together. But that knowledge is also coming from their awareness of how they've kind of operated in the world. And it's a kind of dissatisfaction with just a transactional approach that says we want 50 years of experience in using this particular paintbrush in Photoshop, knowing that that's as turgid as saying we want this really idealistic person who's able to engage in critical dialogue in feminist theory or whatever it might be. And that's not a dismissal of feminist theory whatsoever. And what they know is they get the sense that putting these two things together is actually the place where most sort of stuff is actually happening. So I guess what we're kind of trying to wrestle just now is trying to find, it's almost exactly as per that question, it's how are you playing, literally playing sometimes with those tensions to actually muck about with both of those spaces? Because when you actually really interrogate employers as well, they're kind of almost asking for a very similar thing. So yeah, I don't know where that's going in terms of how that contributes to the conversation, but it does change, I guess, as designers mature. And maybe we are educating at the wrong point. Is there a point at which we've really got to ask ourselves that horrible question? I know I've said this before, and people will be bored by me saying it, but are we teaching the wrong people at the wrong time, in the wrong place? Is there a point at which we've got to say, hang on, the education system has tilted so much, we cannot actually deliver this anymore as responsible design educators? Is there something that we have to ask with respect to that? I went a bit dark.
I think part of what I'm hoping for this conversation too, and Derek, that's such a helpful reflection. I'm curious about other institutions or programs that might be emerging that are targeting that, like recognizing the potential benefit of shifting who, like at what stage of life or what demographic or where people are, educating that at a totally different point and creating new programs around that, or new courses, or totally new types of schools. So if anybody has experience or awareness of things like that, I would be curious to see them coming in the chat on the Miro board or out loud. Please, Rupsha.
Just to answer your question, so currently I'm doing my PhD within a faculty of global health. It's a new interdisciplinary PhD, which allows you to bring in your particular disciplinary knowledge into the context of global health. And the context of global health is quite large because it's a global one. So there are colleagues in my program that are using human-centered design, using systems and service design, to address healthcare needs. And that interdisciplinary focus is really important. But what's really interesting about this program is that it's very low on coursework. So it's essentially run as a project. So you bring in a fully fleshed kind of project and you sort of run it with the help of the institution, with the help of some funding. And you really just get to run a full sort of like, my focus is co-design. So that's the context I'm working in, but it just allows you to have a lot more flexibility in how you experience education. It's not in like a lecture format. And then I also had the pleasure of teaching a studio course recently where my job as an educator was more so as kind of a knowledge consultant, where students did their own self-directed projects and I kind of, guided them a little bit through it, but they, defined their own sort of outcomes. They defined what they wanted to make. And that's more in line with what you would do kind of in the real world, where you manage your project, you budget, that kind of thing. Yeah, I just wanted to share my experience around that.
Thank you. Samantha, please.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that I would add in because I mean, you all can hear in my dialect that I am originally from across the pond, but I'm sitting in Sweden, in Gothenburg, and Ulises and I used to work there, but not anyway. Pretend that I still do, and that what's interesting about the school that I spent the last 10, 12 years in is that we don't really do any form of skill building in the education of the master's degree, definitely, and also a little bit, quite a lot in the bachelor's degree as well. It's a post-disciplinary or transdisciplinary, depending on who you talk to. It has trans or post involved in it. And it's been going on, the bachelor's degree has been going on this way for 20 some years. So it's quite a long, and it's quite different from the school in Stockholm, which of course is the biggest city in Sweden. So that they have, some kind of ups in with that. So we don't. And then it's kind of interesting because then the staff of the design unit is also very interdisciplinary or have practices that are not, they might have a spatial practice that is also about doing exhibitions, or they might have a curatorial practice that leads into graphics and publication work or things like that. So I think actually it's, because I mean, maybe it's just as simple as I jumped across to a new place to start a PhD. So now I see the old one better, but there's something really interesting about the fact that we're not really building skills in the sense of like, here's this software, here's this exact idea of what color theory is, here's this this is how you make sure the space is concerned in a certain way. But instead, we expect the students to be amongst each other to find their own specialties in the sense amongst themselves and through their own kind of ambition. And I must admit, like coming from the US, I originally in the first 5 years, I was really critical of this. Like I was like, we're not teaching them any form of making. They're not using the workshops enough. They're not so it is interesting because I do think that there's problems with it, but also it might be creating students that are capable of doing anything, and whether or not it's called design or not is kind of more normalized to them. But at the same time, I mean, it's a lot of duct tape and a lot of just recycled materials because they're too afraid of doing anything with other materials. So I do think it's problematic in many ways, but I think it's also interesting. So this letting go of the disciplines, like the traditional design disciplines like graphic design, visual communication, and spatial design or interior architecture, and trying to somehow make it be some kind of even where it's always an identity crisis in every student for every minute. So yeah, so that's basically what I thought I would reflect on, even if it wasn't very eloquent. Yeah.
It's okay. I think part of the way that we've been thinking about this conversation and joking about a little bit is that these are often reflections that we have around the dinner table, but they don't often make it into formal kind of educational or academic spaces or platforms. So I think I appreciate the quality of this conversation a lot, and embracing this kind of middle ground between some of the things that are going unsaid about our experiences as working in design education, and yeah, bringing them out into the open. So Ulises, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this went too fast. So now it's almost 1 hour. But so what we actually want to, I mean, we didn't say at the beginning, but we did mention that we kind of applied for using some of these ideas or kind of their preliminary form to basically apply for a theme track. We didn't get it, obviously, but what actually I think it could be a very interesting turn of events, because we then were thinking that maybe the conversation format is even better for this than a track itself. So what we're planning to do is to basically, we wanted to use this experience as well in a way of see if it, some of these questions resonate with people or not, and in what way, and so on, to basically put up a proposal for a conversation, and hopefully have it accepted for DRS next year. So that's something we'd like to do. And so we see this as very much as a collective endeavor, because you've all been contributing both in the chat box here. I see that there were more questions and comments there, and also here in the Miro board. So we're kind of like, we would like to kind of like take some time to really kind of analyze some of this and try to formalize a proposal, in which, if you make, I mean, if the proposal makes it, and you're going to make it also for the conference, we would happily kind of we would be very happy to connect over there as well. And so this is very much a collective work. So we would really, I mean, we still don't know how we're going to work with this, but we'll be happy to kind of like give you updates on how this evolves and share with you the conversation proposal, and etc.
Marina, did you say something?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I know we're finishing up, but as you spoke about this, continuing this conversation, one of the things that came to my mind is reflecting, having an opportunity like the one you described, like the one that's happening here, on the agility or the potential maybe for some increased agility in design education. I would be, we're at the end, but I'd be so curious to know just how rigid design, like educational structures for your design programs are. I mean, the academy is rigid to begin with, but within that, designers are themselves quite reflective and then agile. So just to your sort of put one more thing kind of maybe into your thinking about future conversations, that would be one that I'll be very interested in.
Thank you for that. And you see our kind of email addresses as well. I mean, we're happy to chat and, hear from you if there's anything else you'd like to share with us. And we have some references that have kind of shaped a little bit our thinking on some of these questions. I don't know if you want to add something, Andrew.
I'll just say a big thanks. I know we're out of time. So thank you all. Please reach out if you want to chat more or collaborate in any way. We're very open. So appreciate it.
So, and thank you so much, Andrew and Ulises. It was really interesting to try this as well, because as I say, it's something, this is the kind of thing it would be good to continue the conversation.
Oh. Did we?
Oh, sorry, am I dropping out again? My apologies.
No, yeah.
Sorry, did you catch that last bit? Okay, so if there's
didn't.
anything that we can do to support the continuation of that conversation, it would be absolutely brilliant. I'm wondering, and I don't want to dump any more work on you guys, because it has been useful so far, but is there a way, were you thinking of trying to summarize some of the points that came out today? Because I think there's some things that did come out that might be worth making visible, and they might form the nuggets or the little bits that might sort of move forward in conversations. I know I've had my eyes open to even just some of the, I was waiting for it. I was waiting for some of these invisible structures. I think we've talked about this before, Andrew, but I didn't think they'd be so generalized as something as the definition of value and how that has changed and how it's then had such an impact on what we've actually done. So those kind of invisible language values are actually quite frightening, actually. That's really quite scary because that is so implicit that you don't even see it. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, thank you very much for that. If there is anything we can do to support continuing the dialogue, that'd be absolutely brilliant. We are kind of moving to the Mighty platform and DRS, so there might be other spaces to have the dialogue, but also there might be other ways that we could do it in different ways through EdSig, and if people are interested. So thank you both very much. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stop the recording just now, and if people want to hang on to have a quick chat, I don't mind doing that very quickly. As I say, the next one is on the 12th of December, and that'll be Michael Hall talking about the sort of systems thinking and how he applies it to design. But Ulises and Andrew, thank you very much for today. That was really useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.